What's going on, guys? Jordan Richards here to present to you your Dynasty Stock Watch for week number 15. Now I'm going to continue my series where I talk about the different players and their position groups and kind of how they factor into Dynasty. Now this week I'm going to be talking about the running backs because I don't want to talk on wide receivers yet. I still want to see a little bit more from them, and honestly they're my favorite group to dive into, so I want to have extra information for those guys to give to you. So let's start with the running backs right now. First and foremost, heading into next season, it's important to know that there isn't a whole lot of talent coming in the 2021 draft class. There will be a few running backs of note. Najee Harris, the running back out of Alabama, Travis Etienne, the running back out of Clemson, and there's a few other players like Kenneth Gainwell out of Memphis, Javonte Williams out of North Carolina, and others. But there won't be a whole lot of top-end talent. A lot of those guys came out this season. Kind of just to expand on that a little bit more, it's interesting because it started off, like I even mentioned, I believe in week 1, I talked about Cam Akers, how his stock was down a little bit, how he wasn't performing where he was, and now he's basically an unattainable asset. This is just how fantasy goes sometimes. You start off a little bit slow, these rookies take time to develop, and then by the end of the season, they're locked in, loaded, top 24 picks next year. But the problem with that is that how do you value these guys going forward? They're basically unattainable. Even in Dynasty, if you ask someone for Cam Akers right now, you're going to be asked for 2, potentially even 3 first-round picks, because when a guy blows up for 170 yards on the ground, it's going to be almost impossible to get that player. Like, look at Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor's supposed to be RB1, and again, he blew up. Like, he went off against the Las Vegas Raiders. And so now it's like these guys who are being drafted in the top 5-6 picks of dynasty drafts, it's going to be pretty much impossible now to get them. So I'm not going to touch on these young guys too much. If you have one of these young studs, I would not consider moving them, including Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I know it's not easy to own him right now. He's not producing. The thing is that next year he's primed to be in a good position. But I would mention this again, like I've mentioned a few other places, I would not rule out Damian Williams to take over some work in that backfield. He is probably the best running back we've seen in that system beyond Kareem Hunt. And so I don't see a reason why the Chiefs wouldn't want him back, wouldn't want to bring him back. As ugly as that sounds for fantasy and for Clyde Edwards-Helaire owners, I would be looking to acquire Damian Williams as a potential handcuff or full-blown starter next season. If that's the case, if you're a Clyde owner, I would definitely look at getting Damian Williams because he's not going to be very valuable right now. You could probably get him for a 3rd, 4th round pick to take him off people's hands. Next thing you know, you potentially have a starter next season, or at worst case, a backup to your starting running back just in case. So I wanted to kind of mention that off the top. Then you look at the J.K. Dobbins, who's basically locked and loaded. He's taken over fully for Mark Ingram. And then you, like I said, Jonathan Taylor. Last but not least, DeAndre Swift. He's fully taken over in that backfield, and we know he's been dealing with the concussion and a few other issues, but I wouldn't worry about that. He's still going to be a top 24, potentially even top 12 running back. In my opinion, he'll probably fall into the just outside the top 12, maybe just inside the top 12. I don't think he's going to be a first-round pick in Dynasty. He should probably be a second-round pick, but we'll see what happens with him. I think he's kind of fallen out of favor a little bit. He fell out of favor because he was in Detroit, and I still think because of these past couple weeks, he's fallen out of favor a little bit. But then you look at some of the aging running backs. There's going to be spots available for running backs when you look at guys like David Johnson, Todd Gurley, still in the league, basically worthless for Dynasty. If you own them and you can sell them, please do it. There's no reason to hold on to these guys unless you are desperate. And if you are that desperate, you're not going to win. I will tell you straight up, I'll be 100% honest with you, you will not win with one of those guys on your roster. It's just not going to happen. But then you look at the Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley, Alvin Kamara, Dalvin Cook, Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones has been a sensational running back this season, but the one problem with him and calling him a stud running back is that he still doesn't have his contract. All the running backs from 2017 got extended. The only one who didn't was Aaron Jones. So it's very interesting to see how that's going to play out because where is he going to go? Originally, there was supposed to be all these running back spots that were going to be open. Right now, the only one that's going to be open is Kenyon Drake's home in Arizona, which may be replaced in the draft. Maybe he'll move on. Hard to say on that front, but the other spot is Aaron Jones. We all know that A.J. Dillon was drafted in the 2nd round by the Green Bay Packers, And in my opinion, there is a good chance that he takes over that running back spot to kind of fill in that hole. Because what some people may not know is that Matt LaFleur does come from Tennessee. He was the OC in Tennessee with Derrick Henry. So I could see him wanting to have that bell cow bruising running back at his disposal. And A.J. Dillon certainly fits that mold much more so than Aaron Jones does. So we may actually see A.J. Dillon in that starting running back role next season for the Green Bay Packers, tied to Aaron Rodgers or Jordan Love, whoever's going to play quarterback for the Packers next year. It should be Aaron Rodgers, but you never know with LaFleur. In my opinion, even with that second-round pick, he's kind of flexing his muscles a little bit, flexing to the organization, saying, I want this guy, when there was still plenty of talented running backs on the board. He said he wanted A.J. Dillon. No one in the fantasy and real-life space understood it. They had Aaron Jones. All they had to do was pay him. It doesn't look like he's going to get paid, unfortunately. So it is what it is, and they'll probably move on to A.J. Dillon. So if you can get A.J. Dillon, it's not a bad spot to try and get him because he's probably going to be a fantasy asset in the next season. But then, like I said, I already kind of touched on the studs. You have the Christian McCaffreys, locked and loaded, Saquon. Zeke is interesting. He should be a stud running back still once Dak comes back. I'm not too worried about that, but he has looked really bad this season. So he may fall out of favor a little bit for a Dalvin Cook, Alvin Kamara, who's amazing. And for all we know, maybe some of these stud running backs, the Jonathan Taylors, the Cam Akers, the J.K. Dobbins, who are all going to be easily top 10 guys. But the one guy who is surprised more than anybody, I think, is Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb is thought of as a run-first running back, doesn't catch a whole lot of passes, but I think it's very hard to argue how well he's played. I've seen recently that he's been, just off the charts productive. And you just look at the way he runs, you look at the way he fits into that offense, he's the perfect fit. When he wasn't in the offense, the Browns struggled a little bit. Kareem Hunt, while good, he cannot fill Nick Chubb's role in the offense. And so with Nick Chubb coming back, you obviously see how much better that offense plays, how much easier it is for Baker to deliver the ball, having that bell cow running back behind him. And it's just difficult to place because it's kind of like valuing Derrick Henry, honestly. Nick Chubb is very much that Derrick Henry mold. He's a volume running back, but he's not quite Derrick Henry, and so he's going to consistently be undervalued in Dynasty because he's quote-unquote just a runner. He's not a guy catching 20, 30 passes. Like, he may not even catch 30 passes this year. He may catch 30, but you want your stud running back to be catching like 40, 50, 60 passes. Alvin Kamara is out here catching 80 passes. Christian McCaffrey's out here catching 100. Saquon Barkley caught 70 in his rookie season. But Nick Chubb is not going to be that guy. But the volume for him and his ability to score touchdowns and break off big plays is absolutely there. You need to consider him a stud running back. In my opinion, he's probably just outside the top 5, top 6. One guy, in my opinion, who is extremely overrated is Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon, for the past 3 years, it seems, has been the next great running back. He has all the talent. He's fast. He's strong. He's a bell cow. He can catch passes. But they don't use him that way. And for all we know, it's because he just simply doesn't have that skill set. They still use Gio Bernard, who is old and potentially in the way, but they use him for a reason. They use him because they think he's better than Joe Mixon at catching passes, at pass blocking. And all we've seen from Joe Mixon is injuries and lack of production. The only thing with last season was he turned it on in the last 3 games to give fantasy owners hope heading into this year, and then he got his contract extension. And what do you know? He plays decently well. He has a couple good games. Then he gets hurt for basically the rest of the season. But I still think, for whatever reason, Joe Mixon is still valued as like a top 7, top 8 running back. I just can't do that. I can't go there right now. It's just not a way I like to play fantasy. I don't want to bet on players who don't produce. Injuries are one thing, but I don't think Joe Mixon has ever produced at that elite level to where you can consider him as such, especially when in most cases he is cheaper than Nick Chubb to acquire, and I'd be going after Nick Chubb all day in those circumstances. The other guy I wanted to talk about is Miles Sanders, the running back out of Philadelphia. And the reason why is because he hasn't really been a stud. He's been sharing time with Boston Scott. We can kind of blame it on the offense and the play calling by Doug Peterson, but it's hard, man. It's hard to say whether Miles Sanders is actually a bell cow as far as his workload goes, or if he's just kind of like just beneath it, like just beneath it. He's catching passes. This past week he ran really well against the Saints, but is that going to be a weekly occurrence? Probably not. In all likelihood, it's probably not going to be that way. But the thing is that he's probably still, he's going to be a highly valued running back. You should probably still draft him. The production is there. He's had some down weeks. This whole offense as a whole has had down weeks. The thing with Miles Sanders is that I just don't think you can necessarily sell him right now. You probably have to sell him for, at least a first and a second for it to be worth it. Owners probably aren't going to want to pay that much, which I understand. He hasn't quite produced at that level, but he's worth that. Like, he's definitely worth that. He's probably a top 12 to 16 running back in the league, just depending on how those rookies are valued. But when it comes to next season, he's going to be that, bell cow, fully healthy. The Philadelphia Eagles going to be ready to go again. And if at that point you can maybe sell him for 2 firsts, I would consider it. But if you can't get that for Miles Sanders, there's no point, because he's still a top running back. He's supremely talented. The value is never going to be there right now until he has, a 3 or 4 game stretch where you can trade him for a boatload. And that's when I can potentially be ready to trade Miles Sanders. But until then, I'm not there. It's not where I want to be with my running backs. If I sell them, I want to sell them for a lot. I don't want to kind of sell them on the cheap unless I really don't believe in them. James Robinson especially is a guy that I mentioned potentially selling, but we've seen now he's probably going to be the bell cow in Jacksonville. He's going to have a new quarterback next season. It's probably going to be Justin Fields, and that's going to drastically improve his value because he's going to be playing with better players, It's hard to produce as a running back when you don't have the best players around you, and I believe that Jacksonville's going to have success next season once they get Justin Fields at the helm. As far as other teams go, there's not a whole lot of value to be had. I still believe Josh Jacobs is supremely talented. Another player like Austin Eckler I like a lot. Jacobs will probably be a bit of a value. I believe Eckler will be a massive value this offseason because he got hurt and didn't produce very much. Same with Josh Jacobs, but they're both extremely talented players. I do think the Raiders have some figuring out to do, and I think that as far as the Chargers go, they're going to be much better next season now that Justin Herbert's had a year off in the offseason, working with the players, working with the coaching staff to become a better, more complete team. That defense should be better for the Chargers next year, and they should be a better offense overall. So I would actually be buying up Austin Eckler and Josh Jacobs as well. I don't think there's anybody else I wanted to touch on. I kind of mentioned some of the younger players, some of the older players I'd be dumping, trying to get rid of. So I think that's it for this episode, and I wanted to kind of say thank you guys so much for watching. Drop this video a like, comment down below if there's any other players, running back specifically, that you want me to talk about or give you some information about. But make sure you subscribe to Mayo Media Network. Like I said, drop this video a like and a comment, and I will see you guys next week for arguably my favorite episode of the year, and I'll talk about the wide receivers and some of my draft strategy heading into the offseason. Thanks again, guys, and I'll see you next week. Peace.